My son just dragged my wife into the basement. I'll never forget what he did next. I never imagined that this would be how my evening ended. The day had started with a quiet breakfast, a few chores around the house, and a lazy afternoon with my family. But the atmosphere in our home had been different for weeks. Tense, strained. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about my son, Matthew, had changed. He was just so withdrawn, his eyes dark with a sadness that he never voiced. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized how far things had gone. My wife Karen was in the kitchen, and I was in the living room reading the newspaper. Matthew was upstairs in his room, where he'd spent most of his time lately. I heard his door creak open, and then the unmistakable sound of his heavy footsteps on the stairs. But what I heard next made me put down the paper, my heart seizing with a sudden, inexplicable fear. Karen's voice, soft, confused, calling his name. "Matthew? What are you doing?" There was no response, just the sound of more footsteps, now louder, more deliberate. Then a thud, like something heavy hitting the floor, and a muffled noise that might have been Karen's voice, but was cut off too quickly to tell. My stomach twisted as I stood up, every instinct telling me something was terribly wrong. "Matthew?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady as I moved toward the kitchen. But before I could get there, I saw them. Matthew dragging Karen by the arm, her feet barely touching the ground as he pulled her toward the basement door. Her eyes were wide with fear, her mouth moving, but no sound came out. Matthew's face was expressionless, his movements mechanical, almost robotic. "Matthew!" I shouted, the word catching in my throat. But he didn't respond, didn't even look at me. He simply opened the basement door, dragging Karen with him as if she weighed nothing at all. Panic surged through me, and I bolted toward them, my mind racing, trying to comprehend what was happening. "Let her go!" I yelled, but it was too late. They had already disappeared into the basement, the door slamming shut behind them. I reached the door in seconds, my hand shaking as I yanked it open and started down the stairs. And then I heard it, the unmistakable crack of a gunshot echoing up the stairwell. My heart stopped, the sound freezing me in place for a split second before I forced myself to move. I took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping over myself in my desperation to reach them. When I reached the bottom, the scene that greeted me was like something out of a nightmare. Karen was lying on the cold concrete floor, blood pooling around her head, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. There was a gaping hole in her temple, another in her chest, and I knew immediately that she was gone. My wife, my beautiful, loving wife, was dead. And standing over her, holding a gun loosely in his hand, was Matthew. His expression was eerily calm, almost serene, as if he hadn't just committed an unthinkable act. He looked up at me, his eyes devoid of any emotion, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I couldn't find the words. I couldn't process what I was seeing, couldn't believe that the boy I had raised could be capable of this. "Matthew!" I finally choked out, my voice breaking. "What have you done?" He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, handed me the gun. My hands shook as I took it from him, the cold metal feeling foreign and wrong in my grip. I wanted to drop it, to throw it as far away from me as I could, but my fingers wouldn't release it. "I did what needed to be done," Matthew said, his voice calm, almost gentle. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze focused somewhere beyond, lost in a world that only he could see. "Matthew, why? Why did you—" But he cut me off, raising a finger to his lips as if to shush me. Then, in one swift motion, he knelt down, pressing the barrel of the gun against his own forehead. "Do it, Dad," he whispered, his voice soft but insistent. "Finish it." My mind reeled, every instinct screaming at me to stop, to drop the gun, to do anything but what he was asking. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare at him, my son, kneeling in front of me, asking me to end his life. He tilted his head slightly, meeting my gaze with those empty, hollow eyes. "Please," he said again, almost pleading. "I don't want to live like this anymore." I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. This was my son, my child. How had it come to this? What had I missed? How could I have let this happen? The gun felt impossibly heavy in my hand. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes, but I still couldn't move, couldn't let go, couldn't pull the trigger. I was trapped, paralyzed by a horror that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. We stayed like that, frozen in time, the silence around us growing thicker and more suffocating with each passing second. Finally, Matthew lowered his head, his eyes closing as he let out a long, shuddering breath. "I'm sorry, Dad," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry." And then, before I could react, before I could even think, he grabbed my hand, the one holding the gun, and pulled it toward him. The movement was quick, precise, and I had no time to stop it, no time to pull away. The gun went off with a deafening crack, and Matthew's body crumpled to the floor beside his mother's, the same expression of peaceful resignation on his face. The sound echoed in the basement, reverberating off the walls, but in my ears, it was muted. drowned out by the roaring in my head. The gun slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor as I collapsed to my knees, staring at the lifeless bodies of my wife and son. The room spun around me, the walls closing in, the air growing thick and heavy, suffocating me. What had I done? What had I allowed to happen? How had everything gone so horribly wrong? As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I finally let out a scream, a long, guttural wail that echoed through the empty basement, a cry of anguish, of despair, of a man who had lost everything in the blink of an eye. And as the sound of my own voice faded into silence, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again.